welcome back to my channel. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to do a t-shirt upcycle. I got really lucky and I found this cat bus shirt at a thrift store for only $1. It's sold at Hot Topic for their Studio Ghibli collection, and I happen to be a huge Miyazaki fan. So I decided to take the opportunity and take this well-loved, not so white anymore t-shirt and give it a new look. So to do so, I wanted to change the white since it already isn't really white very much. And I also had this beautiful bento box fabric with this teal background, and it kind of reminded me of all of the Miyazaki films, beautiful food that's always illustrated. So to save the face, so his white mouth and the kind of orangey red block background, I decided to tie it off in sort of a tie-dye effect. Did this a lot in the 90s when I was a little kid, and I feel that this would work. So I'm slowly grabbing all the graphic. It is a rectangle, so it took me a moment to do little pinches of fabric here and there and use a couple rubber bands to tie this off. Since this is a cotton t-shirt, I decided to go with RIT dye. And RIT dye is perfect for natural fabrics such as cotton, and if you were not using a cotton t-shirt with other blends, this RIT dye may not work. You may have to use the synthetic RIT dye collection, or there's other brands like Tulip and a few other collections out there, but this RIT dye brand will work perfectly for this shirt, and I believe this will work out just great. So tying it off like this, it kind of creates kind of like a little doorknob, so it'll be easy to dunk the remaining fabric into the bucket that has the pigment into it. So the dye comes in usually two different forms, usually a liquid or a powder form. Each different type of dye works differently, so please read your instructions. For this one, this is where the bucket is required. I usually put the dye, powder and dye first, then warm water, and then dunk it a few times, and then leave it in there for at least 30 minutes. And be sure not to put the little knobby part in, because that's the part we don't want to be dyed. Once you have rinsed it off and the water goes clear, that means that the dye has got a chance to sit on the fabric to pigment it. And as you can see, as I'm pulling it off right here, we did save Cat Bus's mouth and the rectangle behind him, which I think was really cool. I did leave this out to air dry, so it has the perfect, right time to sit into the fabric. Trying on the shirt right here to decide where I want to cut it off. Again, the shirt is a little snug on me, more than I would like to. So I'm going to alter the size and the design of the shirt like I mentioned in the beginning. Since I'm an illustrator and I like to work visually, I'm doodling out what I think would look nice for the shirt. So I went with cutting off the original shirt, the seam line and the neckline, and then the side seam. This is where I'm going to add my fabric to make it wider. So I'm going to do a panel on the side with the beautiful bento fabric, some frilly sleeves, and a new neck collar and new shoulder seam. So yeah, here's my little doodle. So now we're going to take a look at our fabric we're introducing. I want to let you know that the best way to do this is iron it first. I did not. But you should iron it first, and consider that there will be some challenges only because the t-shirt is a 4-way stretch and the cotton fabric that I chose to introduce is not stretchy at all. So something to also consider is, since this is pre-worn thrifted item, it's already sort of worn to the person before me, and the seams may not line up exactly. So while you're trimming away some of the original shirt, and the reason why I'm cutting off my sleeves is because my new design, I don't have sleeves. So I am cutting a little bit away from the seam line only because I need to make the shirt a little bit bigger. While you're doing this, try to make sure that both sides, the front and the back, are lined up on the seam line as close as possible. Again, you might have some trouble only because the shirt has been pre-worn. Also, this is a mass-produced shirt, so sometimes it may visually look straight, but there's always printing errors, so you never know. Also, with my design, I kind of made kind of a scoop top. I'm not even sure how to explain this. Like, as if you're looking at a princess dress where it has kind of like this sweetheart sort of shape around the chest. That's the kind of look I'm going for the cat bus original fabric I'm leaving, and then the top half for the seam line for your shoulder and your neckline is going to be the new introduced fabric. So right now I'm kind of eyeballing it. I think later I did take a measuring tape and try to make it look as straight as possible. It's a little difficult because I did discover with my cat bus printed shirt it was not centered, so I did whatever looked visually good. Also, I am taking the time to cut open the side seams because the shirt is a little bit too small for me, and this will allow me to introduce a side panel with the new fabric. So now taking the section we pulled off just a moment ago, I saved the neckline and shoulder seam, and I did decide to cut it down the middle, as close as middle as possible. Like I said before, it's not perfectly symmetrical, and this side seemed more symmetrical than the other. This is just my perception, and this is something I took note for myself. If you are doing a graphic fabric like this, try to do like the best area where you would like to see center. And I thought it'd be really cool to have that little, there's a 2 pair of sushi right there, the golden one, as my center neck area. So I decided to hold that, pin it as my marker, so to know that's where I want my center of my fabric to be. And since the shirt is identical both sides and I'm using the fabric from before as my stencil, I am lining up the fabric mirrored, so on the fold. And I am keeping it graphic side up only so I can see everything's lined up, as it is a graphic design. So yeah, on the fold, and you're going to use your piece you cut off as your stencil. While you're doing this, you will struggle a little bit if you are doing a 4-way stretch shirt with a cotton fabric like me, because the fabric will want to stretch while you're pinning. So just try to pin religiously around so you have a decent stencil to work with. This is where your sewing pins will come in handy. Also, while you're cutting this out, since it is a stretch fabric versus a cotton fabric we're doing instead, try to cut a little bit bigger, just because you can always take it in a little bit, versus if it's too small, it's a little hard to do it again without wasting more fabric. A little more trickier, but having a little bit bigger is always better, as you can alter it. So now taking it off the center fold, you can see that this is where your head goes here in the hole here. And it is a small hole only because, again, making it a little bit smaller is ideal versus making it too big. So now I'm just lining up the middle of cat bust to the middle of where my collar neckline is, and pinning it in a straight pin direction rather than horizontal. This allows me to go over my sewing machine and leave the pins in while I sew. Some people believe that you're not supposed to sew over it with the pins in, but I personally have not had any problems. This is preference, but this is easier so I won't accidentally take out the pin too soon and it decides to overstretch or understretch itself while I'm sewing. So yeah, you're just pinning the top half of cat bust, the curve, to the new curve, the new introduced top of the new fabric. A good trick to consider when you sew something that is stretchy to something's not, pin the middle and then pin the outsides and then kind of stretch in between. It's kind of like as if you were sewing elastic into a wristband. You kind of have to stretch things into place. If you are finding yourself overstretching or doing too much, then doing too much of it, then maybe something got measured a little bit long, and just see where it naturally wants to fall on the non-stretch fabric and do it accordingly. Do the same thing to both sides. The front and the back were cut exactly the same. I did mine about 1 inch apart, and we're going to do a straight stitch with 3/4 seam allowance. After you have done a straight stitch on both the front side and the back side of where the bento fabric connects to the cat bust fabric, we're going to do a zigzag stitch to reinforce it. This just makes sure that everything stays into place. Use the widest setting if this is in case you don't have a serger. This works just fine. After you have pinned the front and back, you can see if it looks good. Make any adjustments if you need to. So the fabric has an easier time laying against the stretchy versus non-stretchy, I decided to do a top stitch. So you can see me showing you the inside of the fabric right now. I am just going to take that little lip, the zigzag, fold it up and then pin it. I am going to do the straight stitch on the bento fabric. This again just reinforces my stitch to kind of let the fabric know where it needs to naturally fall now. And I'm going to do this both on the front side and the back side and do another straight stitch. So something to also note, since we are sewing on something that's something stretchy and something not stretchy, I used a standard sewing machine needle made for cotton fabric and I didn't have any problems using that, so just so you know. So when I tried this on, I didn't show the seam for some reason, and I apologize, the lighting changed here as it went nighttime. I really wanted to get this tutorial more progressed. The side seam was still hanging off my shoulders too much, so I came in a little bit, left the part where the bento fabric, the cat bust fabric alone, and then came in a little bit. This is just something I felt looked nice. You can change it accordingly for yourself. Now we are going to use a ruler or a measuring tape. This happens to be a ruler next to me. I have my yardstick. And use more of your fabric to add a side panel. This is going to make it again bigger for me, as I am a bustier person, and I wanted the shirt to feel more like a tank top, more loose. So I am cutting this fabric on the center fold, only because I wanted to make sure both of them are identical to save me time, so I don't have to do two at the same time. And now I'm just going to cut on the seam right there. I'm checking the measurements. I did 5. Only because 5 thickness, only because for seam allowance, and I can always come in a little bit if it's still too big. So again, cutting on the seam right here. So I have 2 5-inch wide pieces by the length of the armpit to the end of the fabric. So now I'm taking this 5-inch panel wide and folding it again so it's easier for me to cut down the middle. And I'm cutting down the middle because I thought it'd be really cool to have the frilly top of the sleeves feed into the side seam, kind of like, no, I just thought it'd be really cool. So you'll see what I'm talking about when I get later in the video. It makes more sense when I do that. So now the side panel has become 2 parts. So it's halved now. So I'm pinning the one side right sides together on the front side, and the other side panel right sides together on the back side. And then also doing a straight seam and a zigzag seam stitch to make sure everything is secure. once you have sewn both parts of your side seam on the right side and the left side of your shirt, you'll see this kind of tail sticking out on the side. That is the extended side panel that we're going to do. It is left open in the middle so I could feed the frill down. I am going to again use my measuring tape to measure the bottom of the t-shirt all the way up to the side armpit hole and then all the way up the curve of the armpit to know how much fabric I'll need for the frill. If you wanted yours super frilly, ideally taking this measurement is only one side right here, so it'd be this measurement times 2, and that's your overall needing of how much you'll need. That times 2 is nice, that times 3 is better. So it depends on how frilly you want yours, and I didn't need a lot of frill only because the bias and how the fabric is laying, it will look more frillier than I think. And I didn't have a ton of fabric to work with, so this is what I ended up with. Now, to make your frill strips, I am taking the length of the fabric and folding it a few times, making sure the seams are as close as possible. I am working on the fold again just so I can have more space to work with on my floor and still have everything lined up nicely. So I decided to make, I was kind of going back and forth on this, have my frills be 3.5 inches wide because I want them to look statement-y but not over the top. So 3.5 inch long strips, and this is as long as my fabric would go. Originally I was thinking I wanted 2 times the length, but how much fabric I had left allowed me somewhere in between, so I kind of just did whatever naturally was left over with the fabric. And this makes, since I folded it on the fold so many times, that made the long strips for me. And yeah, we're going to cut 2 of those, one for the right side and one for the left side. If you don't have enough fabric for this, you can always extend other strips so you have the right length you need. So since the frill, one side of the frill will be exposed and laying out, it needs to be hemmed. How I hem is roll about 3/4 down and roll another 3/4, so I'm encasing the raw edge here. There's other methods you could do, but this one works for me. I'm going to do this on 2 strips. This one is on the wrong side of the fabric, the right side rolled down twice, and then on the other strip I'm going to do the left side roll down twice. You only need to do 1 straight stitch here because it is just kind of decorative stability for the frill, and do a straight stitch on both strips. Once you have done the straight stitch on both sides of the strips, you're going to take the graphic that matches the left and the graphic that matches the right, and take the middles. And again, if you did have to extend it, you could. I decided to extend mine in the middles. I felt like they needed a little bit more. This also helps me because I know where the middle is. The strips on both sides are identical the same. So once you pin the middle on the left sleeve, the same thing on the right sleeve, and then measure the end of the fabric to the other end of the fabric, as in the strip to the bottom of the t-shirt on the front and the strip to the bottom of the t-shirt on the right, and then gather in between. Some of the fabric will be lined up against the cotton bento fabric, and some will be lined up against the canvas fabric. Visually, it is very important, so you can see here that I am doing a straight pin all the way down so I can sew over them, and just take your time pinning. can see my cat Momo loves to help me with all my videos, so I'm sure you recognize her from other ones. So once you have attached that ruffle down the sleeve, down the top part, down the side panel, you're going to take the side panel marks, because you did leave the she's helping so good, don't you think? You can see that we left the middle seam open down the middle, but we're going to reattach them here. We left it open for this opportunity for the frill to be feeded down the middle of the side panel. So we're going to take the top part arm piece to the other top part arm piece and then match them up and pin them. So since the frill panel is already attached and they're going to be in the way doing the side panel pinning, make sure the frills are on the inside so they won't get caught in the sewing machine. And then once you have done that straight stitch on both side seams, you sew them down. It looks kind of weird on the inside because it's like really thick now, but on the inside it will make way more sense. Make sure you do a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch to reinforce your seams. And there we go. Do you see the side panel? It looks so frilly and cute. It's kind of one of those weird instances where it looks odd laying down, but when you wear it, it's so different. And so now we're really close to being done. But now the side panel, both the frill and the side panel pieces are raw edged. And since we are working with a recycled shirt, the edge on the shirt's already hemmed. So we just need to match up those edges with each other. So I'm gonna do some trimming, making sure the panels are the same length. So when I roll hem them, they'll be the same length together. Again, same method. I'm gonna roll it once and then roll it again so that they have a clean edge and a fairly simple finish on them. So for the roll hem, I did peel open the frill, if you will, so that the right sides are facing together, as in the left frill is now facing the left panel and the right frill is facing the right panel, you know what I mean, and roll it together as like a whole sandwich bundle and then sew it together. I like the way I did this only for the reason of when I wear it, the frills want to peel open and want to fan out on the side of me. So I think that looked really nice when I did this. And you just need to do a straight stitch to lock it in and do the same thing on the other side as well. And since it worked so well on the bottom like that, I decided to do the same thing for the top of the armpit hole, where the frill starts from the armpit hole to the bottom of the shirt, and sort of top stitch it too. So the frills will want to stay open on the top part too, and then anywhere from the armpit hole to the bottom of the shirt, again, will want to wave around and have its own little frilly personality while I wear it. And doing it this way also, I think, turned out really nice as well. Since I was already rolling it over just for the area of the frill anyways in the armpit area, I decided to roll it over again for the whole entire circle of the armpit hole. That way when I wear it, maybe runaway little threads won't be sticking out and it looks a little more professional. That way when the frill flaps around everywhere, you just see a clean seam. So for lack of a better word, it's almost like top stitching the, I guess, armpit hole with the frill facing out. You can see right here, it's kind of hard to explain, but wearing it later, I'm really glad that I did this too. So once that's all been straight stitched and done, now it's time to wear the very last piece, which is your neck hole. So I wasn't sure how much more to trim this, so I took another t-shirt that I know fits my neck properly and trimmed the hole close to it. This is just because I know the shirt fit me so well and I used it as a stencil. Feel free to, after you first do it, to try it on and see if you can get your head through the hole, or if it's too small, you know that something happened. You can always add like a color pop, kind of a bias tape neck hole if you want to do it differently. I'm doing the same method as I did before. I rolled it once a little bit and rolled it once a little bit more, just to lock in those raw edges. This method tends to work for me a lot on a lot of different things. This is just trial and error that I've experienced for myself. I'm sure there's other ways you could do it too. Again, I mean, you could just use bias tape here and that would look really nice as well, but this works for me. And yeah, just do a straight stitch all the way around. So once you have sewn around the collar, you are done and completed. This turned out so much fun. I'm really glad I upcycled this shirt, took a chance on it even though it wasn't in the best condition when I got it, but it just shows that your imagination and personality can really come out when you put your mind to it. So I hope this inspires you to make your own upcycled shirt, and thanks for watching and have a magical day. Bye.